Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining. And I think I know everybody, but just in case I don't, I'm Krista Vanderstein and I'm a Regional Development Officer for the Northern Rockies Regional Municipality based here in Fort Nelson. So I won't go into much about the actual strategy because I know Zach is going to cover all of that
Yeah, no
in the
spoilers.
in the first few minutes here, and then we'll hopefully get some good discussion and just see what you guys have for thoughts and ideas and creativity. I will say that I am coming from the traditional territory of the Fort Nelson First Nation and Treaty 8. So pleased to be able to do business here in Fort Nelson. And thank you so much for coming and participating. Off to you, Zach.
Thanks, Krista. So yeah, I'm Zach Fanos. I'll be the facilitator for this evening's session. Just to give you an idea of what we're going to be going through here as we talk about the 5-year tourism strategy. So we're going to first start off this evening with an introduction to myself, my colleague on this project, Elise. We're from Banneken and EM Adventure Marketing. We're going to talk about the Northern Rockies tourism strategy in some detail of what work we've done to date, what we plan on doing, what we're hoping to achieve from this project. We'll talk a little bit in a grand sense about tourism in a bigger idea, what it can do economically, what it can do for a destination, as far as what it can do for residents, and just to get a sense of what the global situation is right now. You know, coming hopefully out of the pandemic in the months ahead, that has changed the way we expect to be traveling, and it's changed the way people perceive travel. So we'll take a look at that for just to provide a bigger construct around the work that we're doing. We'll take a look at some of our initial findings, as we have been on this project for a little over a month now, or just right on a month now, actually. And so we'll let you know what we've discovered so far in all our digging. We'll go over again some of the Canadian and global trends, and then into the meat of our evening, the Q&A, which we want to hear from you all. And again, thank you all for being here. You know, public information session on a tourism strategy isn't necessarily something that everybody's fighting over for tickets, but we really appreciate you taking the time and the interest in this strategy. A tourism strategy, for it to be successful, and I'll certainly be talking about this later in the evening, but for a tourism strategy to be successful, it requires resident buy-in. Now, they can work without resident buy-in, but if you want to achieve what we're hoping to achieve with this strategy, you know, it takes residents who believe in what is being done and are informed. So we really appreciate you being here, taking the time out of your own evening to learn a little bit about what we're doing. And I will let you know a few items to cover before we really get into the thing. Apologies, I've been on Zooms all day. I hope my voice holds out. But one, it is being recorded. We may share it later. There's no necessarily a plan to share it anywhere specifically, but it is a public session. And if there's some good stuff that comes out of it, we want to share it, that we just want to let you know that it is being recorded and could be shared later. And also, yes, the Q&A is kind of the closer for the evening, but we're going to be talking about a lot of different things in the first part of the presentation. So, you know, I don't want anything that kind of came up to be forgotten as we move through. So Zoom has the chat function. I'm sure you're all pretty familiar with that at this point. At any point during the evening, you want to drop things into the chat, some questions. It'll be good for us to have preloaded questions for when we get to the Q&A part. So feel free to drop those into the chat all evening long. Any questions, any comments, those will be saved as well afterwards. So the more conversation going on there, the better as well. All right, so let me allow myself to introduce myself. Banneken Travel and Tourism, the consultancy that I work at, we specialize in sustainable travel and tourism strategy development. So we're a small team, but we've got expertise that extend into branding, storytelling, marketing, media relations, and communications. But really at the core of no matter what it is that we are trying to do in the travel and tourism sector, sustainability is at the heart of that. And that is going to be the case for this strategy as well. Of course, what does sustainability mean? Well, for us, sustainability means quality over quantity. And, you know, in the case of a tourism strategy like the one that we're working on here, What that means is, we don't necessarily want floods and floods of tourists coming in. We want the right people who are going to respect the environment, they're going to respect the residents, and they're going to appreciate what they're experiencing. So it's all about targeting those right people. The quality over quantity is a key to sustainability. We want to enhance regional spirit and success. That's what sustainability is about. It's not, so often I think people think sustainable, that's environmental. Yes, of course, respecting all people in the environment is key to sustainability, but it goes beyond that. And finally, creating long-term plans, of course, that benefit residents, business owners, and visitors. And not necessarily in that order, but residents and business owners and visitors secondary is certainly part of our approach. So I've been with Banneken Travel and Tourism for going on about 7 years now. I've been working on destination development projects like this the whole time, but this has been so far a really compelling and interesting one. We've had a chance to talk to some stakeholders, and yeah, I'm just really excited to be on this project thus far. And as we get into the actual strategy writing in the weeks ahead, I'm excited for what we're going to be presenting at that point too. So as you see, we've got Elise on the call as well. EM Adventure Marketing is led by Elise Mayo. She brings extensive destination knowledge and understanding of Destination BC and past COVID-19 strategic approaches being considered by regional destination marketing organizations, DMOs, to the project. She's got 25 years of experience with tourism strategy development, working in various capacities for DMOs, leading travel brands domestically and internationally, and is really our ace in the hole when it comes to knowing British Columbia and Destination BC in this project. So Elise, turn the mic over to you for a moment to give your introduction and a bit of your own thoughts on the project so far.
Yes, thank you, Zach. Hello, everybody. We'd love to be meeting you in person. I just want to say that again. We're a little Zoom fatigue. Same thing here, Zach. My voice is leaving. So you'll detect a small accent. I'm originally from Quebec, and I moved to beautiful British Columbia, I guess, a little over 25 years ago. And the nature brought me here, the big skiing, the big mountains, the big skies, and the great people. And I never went back, never went back to live there. I worked all my career in tourism in Western Canada, dealing with different, as I said, working for a different association and having clients worldwide. So I've worked on several destination strategies, and with Destination Canada, with Destination BC. So I have a really good sense of our product and what makes BC and Northern BC very special in the world. You guys, I look forward to hear your thoughts tonight. We've been interviewing a lot of people, and it's been fascinating. As Zach said, we've worked on many projects, and I love the fact that working on such strategy at this crazy time, at this time of uncertainty, it's a big reset. It's a big pause. We're all feeling the same way. And I think we need to have a fresh view on any, that to think that everything is possible. We're starting over. And I think for Northern BC, the Northern Rockies, I think you have all the elements that is needed to succeed in this post-COVID era. The travelers want the big space. They want to travel with their bubble. They want to find themselves in deep natures with friendly people and reconnect with themselves after all the craziness. So I really think that talking to all of you, we're getting to a point where we're having a really good sense of where we want to take this. The work that has been done, there's been several strategies developed about your region, and I had the pleasure to read them all. And I think we have there was a lot of great ideas shared, but I think we will come with maybe a different angle. And I'm looking forward right now to hear your comments, because we've talked to business owners right in tourism, deep in tourism. They've experienced some massive loss, but they're hopeful. They have their own ideas of how to reinvent themselves. And I think at the community level, what you guys think is very, very important. As Zach said, we need to hear how supportive you are of tourism and to convince your friends. We need the community to embrace that plan. This is your chance to shine. Take this at the street level and really, becoming a community that really wants, that is hungry for tourism. And we'll get there, I'm confident. So I could go on, but I'm thrilled to be working with Zach, small companies. So I team up with experts like Bannekin Travel, and Krista, it's been a pleasure, and it's just the beginning. So looking forward to continue and hearing the conversations. Thank you.
Thank you, Elise. And Elise will be back at the end when it comes to the Q&A portion as well. So between now and then, you're stuck with me going through where we are, but I'll do my best to keep it entertaining at this time of night. All right, so why are we here? Well, there's a few reasons. Let's start to visit those. First off, it's because hyperlocal and regional tourism opportunities, as Elise was just referencing, they're expected to be critical in economic stimulation as communities weather and then recover from the impacts of COVID-19. And so we really want to be ready. Now, we don't know when that green light is going to flash. And it's not really going to be a green light, as we've all realized. I think at this point, it's going to be a series of many colored lights that slowly take us to and from reopening again. But, we do expect in the summer ahead that there is going to be some reopening. We know from our experience last summer, tourism regionally for every region across Canada was big. With people staying and exploring their regions around them. So we just, that's the reason that this plan is happening specifically right now. It might seem a bit counterintuitive, perhaps, to be doing a tourism plan as the world has been shaken up and as tourism and industry more hard hit than almost any other in the world by the pandemic. But it is because, as Elise mentioned, there's a reset. So we want to be ready when that reset happens. We want to be ready to capture those markets that perhaps are limited in where they can go, and then immediately start growing on that. So there's an opportunity there. We're also here because the Northern Rockies, along with the broader surrounding Northeastern B.C. region, is in the early stages of tourism development. There's some great plans have been put together. But again, this is much like with the situation with COVID-19. We want the destination to be ready. So as Northeastern BC is developing its tourism portfolio, we want the Northern Rockies specifically to be ready to evolve with them. So that's another reason why this plan is happening now. And also because there have been a number of documents, plans, and strategies created, as we were talking about, there was a need to bring these various strategies together in one coherent and actionable plan. It's nice to have a whole bunch of plans, but that can be also its own challenge. So we're trying to bring that, distill it down in its purest and most functional sense for the Northern Rockies specifically. So what are some of those strategies? This will be fun. We'll go through a list. 2019 Destination BC, the Northeastern BC Destination Development Strategy. It's, as you see, came out in 2019. It's in its early phases. There's a lot of good stuff in there. And we've had the opportunity to speak to many of the authors and the people who were behind that strategy. And so that's going to serve, as a nice foundation for what we're working on. There's, of course, the 2013 Northern Rockies Region Tourism Plan. 2013, going on 7-8 years ago now. Not just COVID isn't the only evolution that's happened to travel in the past, the better part of the past decade. Lots of evolutions have happened. So 2013, that plan is in place and there's good stuff to take and continue to roll from, but a lot has happened in the last 7-8 years that needs to be carried forward. There's the 2019 Regional Economic Strategy and Strategic Plan. Tourism is not just about bringing in some visitors for some select businesses to make a little money off of. Hopefully, if this strategy works as we hope it to, it contributes economically for everybody. And so that's why we consider economic strategies in our considerations. The 2007 Northern Rockies Fort Nelson Tourism Strategic Plan, a little old, but we don't want to leave anything on the table. If there's good crumbs in there, and they haven't either been actioned in the past or they were actioned and we think they could be brought back to life, we want to be able to visit that. 2019 Northeastern BC Destination Development Strategy highlights. I think that one speaks for itself, why we would want to be considering that. And the Destination BC 2021-23 Global Marketing Strategy and 2021 Plan. These are obviously much larger plans, province-wide, but Destination BC, they do fantastic work, and you always want to be able to plug into what they're up to. And so, as we build our strategy, we wanted to have on-ramps to these larger strategies so that the stakeholders and residents, everybody can take full advantage of these much larger strategies that have been created in those places that it makes sense. So we've been going through these strategies, and I will tell you, they are very dry. They're filled with acronyms and definitions, as strategies tend to be. But we're hoping that everything that we're going to pull into it can come with a little bit more action, something serviceable for everybody to really be able to take and run with. So that's just, in case you wanted to know what we've been looking at, you can go and reference all those. So what are we doing? What we've been doing and what we're working here is community engagement with residents, visitors, and tourism professionals. That's a key component to the development of the strategy. Again, thank you, residents, for being here this evening for this meeting. It's crucial that we have people who are enthusiastic about this, or we could create the perfect plan. But if the residents, if the stakeholders are not enthusiastic about it, nothing comes of it. So we really want to know, what is it that the community, various communities need? What is it that the residents need? And what is it that local stakeholders need? So strategy, engagement strategy has been very crucial thus far. And of course, we're also balancing the quality of life of residents with visitor experience. Lately, that's proven to be most important in the current era of travel. It wasn't something that was considered often in the past. It was bringing as many people. Who cares what the locals feel about it? Let's just get the money. That's not how it works anymore. If you want to be able to offer something of value, the residents need to be engaged in that. So one of the many approaches to achieving this balance is strategically attracting people, as I was talking about earlier, who value and appreciate the region's unique identity, respect the land and the communities, and can act as destination stewards. We want to be creating a strategy that brings in visitors who increase value for the locals, not decrease value. I mean, we had a lovely young family in a workshop earlier this week who've been talking about experiences I'm sure many of you had traveling, where you get in a situation and you're in a spot that hypothetically should be beautiful. The pictures you saw in the brochure were gorgeous. They just weren't packed with tourists and garbage and overflowing garbage cans and cars parked on the side of the roads and lineups for washrooms that really decrease the value. That's the kind of thing that we want to make sure we're going to avoid. And so that the people who are visiting have a respect for the destination. That's why it's key to have a strategy. All right, talking a little bit about tourism now. This is, granted, a bit high level, but I want to be able to provide some context of why we're doing the work that we're doing. So pre-COVID-19, tourism represented a $2 trillion industry globally. It's a massive number. It's impossible to get your head around. I recognize that. Scaling it down a little bit for British Columbia specifically, $20.5 billion. So it's a big industry. And it's a growing industry, because those two numbers, they represent a 53.3% increase since 2007. And the reason I'm telling you this is just to say that not only is this tourism strategy, we're not necessarily looking to find people who would be going to other destinations. We're not looking to necessarily steal travelers from other places. Of course, we know that the Northern Rockies have some really great stuff, and people should probably consider traveling there before they go to some other places that are perhaps better known, more popular at this point, but also that the market continues to get larger. And I'm going to hit on this point several times in the presentation, but it's a pie that keeps growing. And so there's money to be had out there. Absolutely. Now, I will say these numbers had to have the brakes pumped on them a little bit. COVID-19 probably set the whole thing back about 4 years is what experts are estimating right now. So, 4 years in the grand scheme of things isn't all that long for us to be back to rolling where travel and tourism was. And experts, it says here, experts predict a rise in demand, especially for local tourism experience in the immediate future of international travel is pretty unpredictable. Borders, who knows when they'll be opening up. And so there's an immediate need. There's also this growing market. Experts also kind of expect that this pent up demand for travel and people's appreciation for being able to explore likely will have grown over the past 13 months. And so that's something that, yes, it's fair to have a conservative estimate that the economy on a tourism level will return for about 4 years or so, but there could also be a boost in there. This is all unprecedented territory, so it'll be interesting to see. So that's just a bit of a bigger spotlight on what's happening. And tourism, an important concept, I think, from the tourism lens is it's not just, as I was mentioning earlier, it's not just about welcoming visitors. It can be much more than that for a region, for a municipality, and for a destination, because it can be something that inspires people to move there. It can be something that inspires people to invest in a destination, to study there, or start a business in the region. It's much easier to say, yes, I can open up this little cafe because this place suddenly has 3 new rentals for kayaks that have opened up. There's new outfitters on the street. So suddenly there's people coming, there's street traffic. And so it can be the growth can be exponential is probably too strong of a word, but one thing can lead to another with tourism. So I just think it's important that as we go through our presentations and as we get into the Q&A a little bit later to keep in mind that this isn't just about getting visitors and getting some nice visitor dollars into the region. It's about what it can do in the long term, just for the region in itself and for inspiring people to invest, study, move, start business. And tourism development in any place, it needs to be managed, as I was talking about, strategically. It doesn't have to be managed if you don't mind it running wild on you, if you don't mind suddenly turning into, I don't want to dissuade anybody, but say a Niagara Falls, for instance, where everything is flashing lights and too many people, and it's just not necessarily the most appealing. And that's what happens if there's not a plan in place, to ensure. Or what can happen if there's not a plan in place is the tourism dollars flow in and they go to just a couple people who started their one specific thing, and it's not dispersed. There's no way for it to be shared. There's nothing complementary to give everybody else an opportunity. So that's what we want to be doing, is putting together a plan that has positive long-term viability. Again, back to that sustainability idea. So quickly, what we've been up to so far, just to give you a sense of what we've been working on. We are currently in phase 1 of our 3-phased approach to this project. It's the stakeholder engagement phase. So what does that mean? It means one-on-one interviews with steering committee and stakeholders. We've been doing those for the past few weeks, as Elise was alluding to. We've talked to a ton of people now. We've done 3 workshops with stakeholder groups. Those have been fantastic. You've got a lot of great people working in tourism in the region with a lot of really good ideas for what this can be and what's already been done. I mean, there's some really fantastic tourism happening right now. It's not as if there's nothing. A public information session, which you're aware of because you are in it right now. A stakeholder and resident survey, which if you haven't had a chance, I know we've already been getting a good number of answers in. So thank you if you've already hit on that survey. But if you haven't yet, we will be sharing that link to that survey in an email following up after we're done with our session. So you can answer there. Again, nobody knows the destination like the people who live there. So please let us know. And we'll also be having next week a special meeting with the regional council because, again, much like resident investment, resident buy-in is important, local government is extremely important. Having local government buy-in can make or break one of these strategies, can make or break a destination. So we're excited to be meeting with the council next week and obviously keeping that in mind throughout the strategy as well. Up next for us, still on our to-do list, is phase 2, April, May. So phase 2, we're into it now. We're going to be doing comparable analysis. And what that means is I'm going to be taking a look at some destinations that Northern Rockies might be competing with. We're going to be looking at some destinations that might be complementary to the Northern Rockies. And we're going to be looking at some destinations from far-flung places that have perhaps dealt with some of the issues that the region has dealt with before, have overcome those issues, or some of the things the problems or issues that they've encountered and how to avoid those. So that's why we'd like to take a look at some of the other destinations. We're going to be doing a tourism asset inventory, gap analysis, and a situation analysis. Those are all exactly what they sound like, seeing where we might be missing some things, taking a look at everything that we can put into the ecosystem that is tourism and see how it works together and see where in that it might not be connecting and how we can help it connect, and just taking a look at the overall situation. And finally, phase 3, which we'll be doing in May, which is now just a week away, we'll start to be working on the tourism strategy development and the final report. So that's drafting the strategy and recommendations, going back and forth with the steering committee and some of our stakeholders, and then finally at the end, developing and delivering the final strategy. So that's our final goal. That's coming up in the next 5 weeks. So all that just to tell you what I've been up to. All right. So here's what we've learned so far. And again, we've been really in the fact-finding phase. It's really been about talking to people, reading through those strategies, talking to people. But there are some things that have obviously stood out, and we're starting to put our notes together. There's 3 real themes that we think, and this is where we welcome all feedback. We welcome all feedback right across this, but especially as we get into this, if you're seeing something that doesn't jive for you, it doesn't hit right, it doesn't make sense, let us know. But so far we've seen the big 3 themes: wildlife and nature. I doubt anyone is going to have any argument with that. Wildlife and nature is pretty obvious and pretty immediate and frankly pretty spectacular in the destination. So clearly a leading theme, clearly a leading attractor. History and culture. Most obviously, I think the first thing is the Alaska Highway. So much history and culture there, but of course, obviously with First Nations, Indigenous culture as well. And just the North has its own rich history and culture, and just hasn't, not just in your region, but in general, hasn't been explored the way you just see when you travel anywhere. Route 66, for example, in the United States, that it's packed with an understanding of where they've come from and who the people are that have built those places. And so there's a lot of that still to tap into, some of it already being tapped into quite beautifully. And finally, the remote nature of where you are, the disconnection, quite literally in some senses, as you're going to see when we get into the challenges in a moment. Yes, of course, the fact that it's a really long drive, or it's not a cheap flight to get into, and there's not necessarily regular flights, that is a challenge. That said, now more than ever, following up COVID-19, people want to be able to get away. People want to be able to find space. People want to be able to disconnect. And I've been saying this in all the workshops, but I really mean it. There's that feeling when you see all the bars on your phone drop off, and that can give you for a moment a sense of freaking out, because now you're suddenly not connected to everything that you once were connected. But it's becoming increasingly difficult to find places that just feel a little bit off the map, that feel like you're discovering something, and places where you can say, you can't reach me, sorry. That's a value, and it's increasingly becoming a value. So we see that as absolutely a draw for the region. So that's not to say, if there's something that doesn't fit into these 3 buckets, we're not looking at it, but these are just the big 3 that have stuck out to us so far. Now, this isn't our work, but I think it's worth talking about. The Northern Rockies Iconics, the Invest in Iconic strategy. That's a long-term strategy by Destination BC, and its goal is to responsibly increase tourism revenue and visitation to BC through dispersion, using place branding, place making to competitively differentiate BC on the world stage. So what they're doing is they've developed a program where they're identifying some of the iconics. And so the iconics for the region that they've identified are the hot springs, the Alaska Highway, as I was talking about, and MK. Now, these are 3 that we're going to be taking a long look at. We're going to be considering deeply for our strategy. One, because, as we say, we want to be able to take advantage of things that Destination BC is doing. And as they have identified these iconics, we're not going to disagree with them. They're also right. These are awesome. But yeah, we think, they're not necessarily as known as they should be on the world stage, and there's just so much potential. And again, these are the big 3, the immediate 3. These are the iconics that that Destination BC has identified. But we also think, there's potential for more iconics in the region, for sure. More things that could achieve kind of this status with just some love, care, and some attention given to them. So plenty of potential. Now looking at some of the challenges and opportunities in our early observations and conversations. So challenges, as I was talking about, it is something that people appreciate and want to find, but it is undeniably a challenge as well. It's the distance and the cost to get here. No getting around that. there is no singular tourism asset synonymous with the region. So I just said there's those three iconics. How is there no single asset that's synonymous with the region? Well, I think for locals, I think for people within the larger region around, the Alaska Highway definitely is. But when we say this, I'm talking about the big ones that people immediately, if I were to say Northern Rockies, people would say this thing. I'm here in Toronto, we've got the CN Tower. That's that. It's not the greatest, but it's an icon all the same. You've got Niagara Falls, it's the falls. Paris, it's the Eiffel Tower, And again, it doesn't have to be the best. Like I've been living in Toronto for about more than a decade now. I've been to the CN Tower once because my family came to visit. It's not a very good tourism site, but it is an advantage because people know about it. And so that's something that isn't there yet. But if we can create probably from the iconics list, something that becomes synonymous with the region, something that immediately people think about, that's an advantage at that point, because suddenly then you can build off, then you can find complementary pieces, then you've got your initial magnet to bring people in. So it's a challenge, but it can be an opportunity. A lack of strategic cohesion between tourism stakeholders. That's just the reality of the situation right now, because there hasn't been a lot of strategy in the past that built towards this. And that's not a fault of anybody. It's not even necessarily a problem for individual stakeholders. Many of them operating in silos. They've got their customers coming, they deliver excellent product, and the customers come and go. Everybody's happy. It works out. But there's always advantages to working complementary to each other. There's always benefits for everybody. So coming up with a strategy that really works cohesively between the tourism stakeholders in a stronger way, that's our goal. But currently, it would be a challenge. A lack of established actionable steps to achieve the regional tourism goal. So that's what I was talking about up front. We've got a lot of good guidance, got a lot of good roadmaps to where we want to go. But how do we make those work for your region specifically? What are the actions? That's why we're doing so much fact finding, is because the more we understand how tourism in the region works, the more we can take these larger plans and apply it more specifically and say, do this with this or this. And then, of course, limited training and tourism readiness opportunities. That, I could use that on a slide for 99% of destinations that we work with. It's just the reality for the most part. If you're not one of the prime destinations on earth, and even some of them, training and tourism readiness is generally lacking, and it's something that can be built up. And when you do build it up, there's a lot of advantages to it. But yeah, at the moment, that isn't there. Our opportunities, as I've been talking about this whole time, plenty of enticing tourism assets. There's no doubt about that. The attractions, the activities, the excursions, the outfitters, the accommodations, in many senses. There's a lot of great stuff that just people need to know about. Tourism's never been prioritized. That makes sense. It's heavy on resources. You had a lot of great things that you were looking towards in the past to really stir the economy. That makes a lot of sense. Tourism isn't prioritized in most destinations, but as I was alluding to earlier, as this market becomes bigger and bigger and there's more to get out of it, and we put a priority on tourism, that can be an opportunity for us. Ecotourism, plain and simple, it's growing. And you have nothing but space and experiences and gorgeous vistas for ecotourism to thrive in. So that's an opportunity. Northern Lights, just like ecotourism, it's something that is becoming increasingly attractive around the world. There is a growing market of it. Yes, the Yukon put their stamp on it quickly, but they also recognize in their strategies that I've been looking at that there's competition for it, that there's demand elsewhere. And from everybody that we've been talking to, Northern Lights are pretty good in your region, if not superior. So it's just a matter of figuring out how to let people know, actually, the best Northern Lights are here. And a well-considered provincial and regional strategies, as I've been talking about this whole time. There is something for us to tap into. We don't have to create something whole cloth that has never existed before. There's a larger frameworks that have been well considered, well oiled, and ready to go, that we just need those on-ramps to get into. Again, I'm going to get a little high level on you, but bear with me. There's a purpose to this. I just try to give you a sense of what's out there once more as far as the economics of the situation. So Canadians specifically here, age 65 and older, are going to be seeing the largest growth rates in the coming years. Is that good or bad for tourism? turns out it's good for tourism, as boomers continue to be the primary driver of travel performance. And it's not even close. I'll tell you, I've been working in tourism for about more than a decade now, and I'm actually exhausted of marketing to boomers, because it'd be fun to market to a couple other market segments, just because it changes up the way you message, it changes up how you reach people. But the reality is the vast majority of the tour operators and destinations we work with are going after the boomers because they've got the money, they've got the sheer numbers, and they really like to travel. And that's not going anywhere anytime soon. Canadian boomers specifically, they're healthier, wealthier, and more mobile than they've ever been. So even as they pass 65 to 75, you used to see a dwindling of travel at that point. That's just not the case anymore. So again, that market isn't shrinking. And even as the oldest boomers start to turn 75, there's a new market coming in, a huge market that, Gen X didn't really fill because they were just such a small generation compared to the boomers. Millennials, huge market. There's going to be 10 million millennials as the boomers start to hit 75. And millennials, for a long time, I say this as an elder millennial, we were synonymous with youth, and we were just the young people. That's no longer the case. Millennials now have families. They're into career portion of their working lives. They've got money, and they travel in interesting and different ways than boomers do. So, that's an opportunity in itself as well. And also, they're expected to be the least nervous to travel post-COVID. There's going to be less reluctance on their part to get out there quicker. So that's especially in the parts of the strategy that we want to grab that initial post-COVID boom. We're going to want to be speaking to millennials when we talk about that. Larger Canadian and global travel trends that we want to be keeping in mind. Increase in the foreign-born population in Canada estimates 143% increase in minority population by 2031. That's going to heavily skew toward Asian Canadians. And a large portion of that population is going to be settling here where I am in Toronto, and of course on the West Coast. And that's interesting for a few reasons. One, it just forces you to think a little bit about how new Canadians might be traveling, but also Canadians who've born and raised here have a propensity not to explore Canada as much as we probably should. There's just a tendency to think you're not really traveling if you're still in Canada. You're not visiting somewhere else. You're not, even though this country's massive and there's endless amounts of different experiences, Canadians don't tend to think that way. But new Canadians have a different appreciation for the country. And as that number continues to rise, we see more and more new Canadians. They're going to be more eager to explore their new home than perhaps Canadians who just take everything for granted. Eastern Canadians, we say that Ontario to the rest, as well as Asian Canadians from the West will continue to seek luxury travel opportunities. So that's an opportunity that we want to be thinking about. And Canada is home to 3% of the world's millionaires and is ranked 9th in the world in the number of ultra high net worth individuals. So they're not necessarily the largest market that we're going to be looking at, but there's opportunities, especially when you've got remote disconnection, for extreme luxury as well. People with a lot of money want to get away from everybody. Ask what they were up to in COVID. They weren't sitting around their own homes like the rest of us. And so it's a market, once again, that there are opportunities for, in a market obviously with a lot of cash. And finally, the global adventure tourism market was valued at $586.3 billion in 2018. That's projected again to be about 1,626.7 billion by 2026. Again, what do these numbers mean? They're just big numbers, but adventure tourism is obviously something that the Northern Rockies is ripe to offer to the world. And it's a market that was, let's say 20 years ago, almost non-existent. It was for, the Germans who like to put on their shorts and go for hikes, and everybody else wasn't necessarily in that vein. The whole world wants adventure travel now. It has, over the last few decades, as you can see here, it is skyrocketing in its value. It's expected to double in its value again in the next 5 years or so. And adventure travel is what you have endlessly. So, that's a market that is growing and waiting to be further tapped. So what does all that mean locally? Speaking, that was very global and some big numbers. What it means locally is it can create jobs via direct employment, obviously. Hotels, museums, restaurants, but not just that. Secondary employment, gas stations, grocery, retail stores, cafes, they all benefit from more people visiting. By nature, tourism is bringing in money from outside the region, which is one of the key reasons that so many destinations are starting to turn towards tourism. It's a way not to just circulate dollars within the communities, but it's to bring dollars from outside the communities. So a complementary tourism strategy that spreads money across multiple local businesses. That's why we want it to be complementary and all stakeholders to be able to share, because then it ensures more circulation. And businesses that are directly and indirectly supported by tourists, they pay their employees. So then they circle that money locally. They pay for services provided by locals, create opportunity for more secondary jobs. Simple economics. Tourism also helps in the development and maintenance of local assets such as trail systems, parks, local infrastructure, and that benefits residents. And a big part of our strategy, I have a feeling, is going to be talking about those trails, developing those trails, bringing signage in. That's not just for the people visiting, that's for people who live there, hopefully more so even than people who visit. It's these improvements simply to the local infrastructure. And finally, it helps to conserve and celebrate heritage sites, natural attractions, and culture by creating space and driving capital into those efforts, allowing people to showcase their cultural traditions, maintain important areas. So, I can speak having experienced this in ridiculous scale with clients in Kenya before, turning to conservation for the sake of bringing tourists in begets more conservation, and people want to, they see the value in those local assets that maybe were harder to conserve, preserve, and celebrate before. Local heritages as well. Oh, we didn't even realize people cared that we did this, but now it's a celebration, it's a chance to pass on these traditions. So that's what we're hoping this strategy at the end of the day accomplishes, is it goes through those things I've mentioned so far and starts to do this. So community input. So ensuring the communities of the Northern Rockies region are involved and kept up to date is important to us, as I've been mentioning throughout this presentation. So our resident engagement, again, includes this one public consultation session. Thank you so much for joining us. The resident survey I mentioned, which is open now. And of course, you can follow the municipality's Facebook page for any further updates as we go along and keep you abreast of what we're doing. Further input welcomed and encouraged by email. My email right there, zach@bannekin.com. And you'll have that as well later when we follow up and keep up to date. That's the website. Obviously, I don't expect you to take that down, but I have just shared it in the chat. So that is going to be in a rotating rolling. We're always adding information and updates as we continue on with the project. You can find the link to the survey there as well. So that's a good spot to check out if you're asking, where are they now on this strategy? That'll be kept up to date.